Hello and welcome to the program. Now, October is Transport Month in South Africa, and the theme for this year in Gauteng is smart mobility. And you've got to ask the question, what is smart mobility? Well, the Gautrain here in Johannesburg has certainly demonstrated the concept of our smart mobility. We have seen a service that has certainly maintained one of the highest levels of operational efficiency with the Gautrain itself achieving an average availability of 99.6%. And when you look at the train service operations in terms of punctuality, we are talking more than 98%. So let's get an expert to talk about what exactly this means for Gauteng going forward. And I'm joined by the member of the Executive Council of Gauteng, that's MEC Mamabolo. MEC, thank you very much indeed for your time. I tried to sum up this smart mobility concept, but I wanted you to begin at the outset perhaps by justifying why you are going smart in transport and what exactly it will mean for the commuter going forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and to all the viewers. We are deeply delighted that we are in the Transport Month and we have put on the table a very globally celebrated concept, which is accepted and practiced worldwide, and that's the concept of smart mobility. Now, we have adopted this concept for our province because we have got almost 5 key objectives that we want to achieve. But before I get to that, I must just simplify the concept of smart mobility to mean how to move about in Gauteng province. Simply put, how do you go about using public transport? Simple, easy, convenient, cheaper, greener, and of course, in terms of time, very good. So that's what it means in simple terms. What we want to achieve is smart mobility must firstly help us reduce crashes on the road carnage. It's quite a serious matter in our province. And any serious investor looking at investing in Gauteng will look at this vector. The other big culprit that we want to deal with is congestion. We know that many parts of the world are battling with congestion, and congestion again, it's a disincentive to any serious investor because their goods can't move efficiently, cost effectively in the province. And the other objective we're looking at, we know climate change is quite serious, and the road network, it's one of the biggest culprits in greenhouse gas emissions. So responding positively to the challenge of climate is our third primary objective. Fourthly, we want to deal with the issue of the time of travel. We know that if you spend a lot of time, whether you are a learner, you are a worker on the road, a commuter, or even a freight, which is goods on the road, any time spent on the road for passengers, it means not being productive in school, in class, at work. For businesses, it means the cost of movement of goods is too high. So time is also very much important. And most importantly is that we know that Gauteng province, it's a province that is built on the history of gold, which is a non-renewable, and gold is gone with very bad environmental damage to our province. So we want to make sure that we position transport, both its infrastructure, mobility of passengers, of goods, to be the best performing economic indicator, but also giving us a sustainable economy that's not based on non-renewables, and make Gauteng the internal hub of smart mobility for people and for goods. And that is what we are promoting this month and joining the world community in pursuing smart mobility.
Yeah, thank you very much for outlining those broad goals. But before we go deep into the individual parts of them, and I really want to get into smartness itself and what it means, I wanted first of all to understand from your perspective the sort of time frames that we're talking about so that people can begin to think and evaluate as we go along what progress or lack of progress there is in the Gauteng government itself implementing this.
Yes, that's a very crucial point, and let me just go to where you started. The concept of smart mobility in the province is not a far-fetched, long-term goal. If you just look, let's take, for example, passenger movement, commuter movement. What are the pillars that are in place already? If you look at the performance of Gautrain in terms of time, reliability, availability, we already have a benchmark. If you look at Gautrain in terms of leveraging smart technologies, in Gautrain, you're able to use a commuter card, even your bank card, your credit card, to tap and then you go. That means we will be able quick and fast to have an integrated transport system in which this Gautrain ticket and the technology they have, we can introduce it to subsidized buses, to metro buses, including BRTs. We can introduce it to taxis, in which case it will give us a seamless, integrated public transport system. So the capabilities, the performance, the experience is already there. Now, all what we need, and remember, we are setting up the Gauteng Transport Authority. We have the advertisement for appointing the board is closed. We are currently evaluating. And the first task of the board is precisely to do integration based on existing capacities. We don't have to go to Europe. We don't have to go to China. The capabilities are right here at home. All we have to do is plug and play. And Gautrain is giving us the capabilities, the infrastructure, the technology, and the experience. So we're not talking long-term, something that is still a pipe dream far. So quick and fast, I can tell you, just in the next year. And remember, also, we're coming out of COVID. And it has also meant lots of things that were in play and have been pushed a little bit. So next year, you will see us with this concept we are launching this month. You'll start to see some of the components coming in. And of course, even investment in the economy. Look at the areas where there's a Gautrain rail line. It tells you transport infrastructure is a very powerful tool to grow the economy, to create jobs, to fight unemployment.
Yeah. So this is a live plan. I think that's the message that I'm getting from you, MEC. So I wanted to know, in your planning, I don't know what the numbers are. I'm hoping that you'll be able to tell me. Do you have the individual percentages of how people will be moved in Gauteng around? And here I'm talking of, in my head, a pie chart that shows rail, that shows buses, that shows taxis, as in the minibus taxis and the other private modes.
So what is the overarching strategic policy and where we want to go to as a province? The end game. The end game is that commuters in Gauteng must move through rail. So the strategic goal here is that when all is said and done, rail must be the backbone and the pillar of public transport, including movement of goods and freight.
Sure.
That is where we are going to. Now, with the expansion of Gautrain, and of course with the work that has been done at national to get metro rail in the most best levels of efficiency and effectiveness, we're looking forward to shifting movement of people towards rail. Currently, the road network, particularly the taxis, are leading with about 70% of commuters using taxis. But gradually, if we want to protect the climate, if we want to save lives of people from accidents, if we want to make sure that the little money we have to protect the road network and the damage that is done by trucks and just using the roads, with limited resources, with a poor performing economy and less taxes and less revenue, the best cost-effective way will be rail over time. But we are alive to the fact that that's not an objective we're going to achieve soon. So the quickest way to relieve the commuter in the province is an integrated public transport And we believe, and this is not long term, it's medium, a short to medium term is we should find a commuter-based subsidy using an e-ticketing system in which you can swipe in the taxi, in Gautrain, in buses, and you move seamlessly across the province, because the biggest cost item for any family in Gauteng is the cost of travel. So the spatial cost of travel is too high in this province. And that is why a commuter-based subsidy supported by smart technology in the form of a card with interoperable capabilities integrating all modes of transport is the quickest, shortest, best way to bring money back into the pockets of commuters. In that way, you boost aggregate demand in the economy, and people are able to participate in the economy and boost consumption as one of the critical elements of growing and sustaining an economy.
2 quick points, MEC, on that front. In terms of that interoperability that you are talking about and this drive to try to reduce costs for commuters, how far are we from being able to do the tap in the taxi? That's number one. Number two, in terms of that gradual move that you spoke about to rail, how far are we? I wanted sort of the final number that you are looking at. You said the bulk. I was hoping you would give me 50, 60, 70, 100%.
Well, as I'm saying to you that currently we're sitting with 70% using taxis. And the rail and the buses are, and of course private vehicles, are sharing a small percentage of transporting people to and fro where commuters. So if in future we could just at least pass 50%, over a time that we can forecast, once the Transport Authority come into place, we are going to set targets on a 3-year basis as to what will be the marginal performance in a 3-year period, reducing pollution, accidents, but also the time, and most importantly, fundamentally, congestion on the road. So Gautrain is helping us to see the benefits of moving cars out of the road. So rail, and I can tell you with the expansions we're going to do on Gautrain, we will be able over time to give you clear targets in 3 years of the percentage performance, the marginal performance in percentage terms of how many people who are migrating from the road network into what should be the pillar of mobility, and that is rail, which will finally and eventually be almost 70% of the movement of people in the province.
Okay, let's tap it. Let's get into the detail of it then. So I think in large measure we have addressed the issue of smarter mobility. I want us to come to the issue of integrated. Maybe just spell it out for us again, the components that will form that integrated transport system. And again, I'm sorry, MEC, I'm going to keep pressing again for targets and timelines.
So when we talk about integration, you're absolutely right. We must be able to say, what is it that's being integrated into what? So, so let's start. So the integration means the following in our province. It will mean Gautrain, the taxis, the subsidized buses, and of course, the BRTs in the municipalities and the metro buses that are there. And of course, as I said, the taxi industry itself, which most people might believe it's not going to happen. So all these 5 modes of public transport through the Gauteng Transport Authority that has already come into effect, we should be able to integrate them. And the best form of that integration is being able to move from a bus to a taxi to a train using one form of payment, which is a commuter card, which is accepted by all of them. So that if you are traveling from Sidibeng through the city of Joburg, Tshwane, you are able to use a ticket, and you know through smart technologies what time will your taxi rank close in the city of Joburg, which taxi takes you where, and when you arrive in Tshwane, you'll get a BRT, it closes at this time, it takes you at this place, this is the time you'll arrive. Then you are able to say, I will arrive late, let me plan it differently, because you have got data, you have got information about times, about costs, and where you are going, and how will you arrive there. So that is in practice what we should have, because currently people travel without information. In certain instances, they use a card, you need to have cash with you. So that is not a smart way of moving in a province, and it is also expensive, it is unreliable. You don't even know if the bus or the train is going to come, or the taxis will be there, the taxi rate. So that is the problem we are trying to deal with in our province.
Absolutely. And we are talking, of course, about the province that ushered in Africa's first high-speed train, MEC. I wanted to remind you of that in 2010. That happened. And it's important that these milestones are kept alive. So the challenge, I suppose, for you is to keep on pioneering. Now, you alluded to the challenge of bringing in the taxis. And I wanted to tackle that a little bit. How are those talks with the operators? Number one, informalize them, because that's part of the solution, isn't it? And then secondly, getting them to be part of the overall solution. And again, timeframes, MEC.
Yes, let me address the issue of timeframes to you. And I want to emphasize this point, and I'll come to the taxi industry.
Sure.
The point that I would like to emphasize and overemphasize, if that's the right word, is the plans and the timelines have been thrown into disarray by the shutdown. Our plan would have been by now, we should be having the Transport Authority in place. How does it help us with timelines? Is that it is an institution of transport planning with clear targets set.
Okay.
And that is, we will be able by then now, giving you a concrete plan and say, here is it, the milestone to be achieved at this time. The other thing I've said in addition to that is, it is not long-term, because Gautrain already give us the lessons and the capacity is here. So we're not looking at something we're still going to be thinking about. All what we need is to plug and play into the capabilities of Gautrain. So we're not talking something complex, something difficult, still having to carry it back to Europe or to China or somewhere. That's not what we're talking about.
Sure.
The last point you're raising about the taxi industry is that remember that transport systems must not, particularly public transport, must not be competing against each other. One must be feeding into the other, and there must be a cycle supporting and one resting on the other and connecting commuters. So the taxi industry, in the resolutions we have had last year, and the good work that we have been continuing to do of modernizing and making or building the smart taxi industry. The taxi industry is amenable, it's welcoming, it's open to being part of a modernized public transport system in which they benefit and in which they are also considered an important player. Of course, feeding into what we call rail being the backbone. It doesn't mean the taxi industry goes away or fade away. It means it becomes a feeder system. Secondly, the taxi industry has also appreciated that the fact that they are not participating in different businesses, sectors of the economy, automotive sector, and other, of course, public transport businesses, it limits them narrowly to just on the road and the commuter. Gautrain, again, has led with a good example, and this example is normally not being talked about. If you look at the Gautrain stations, they have got a partnership with the taxi industry. They have brought the taxi industry into the train stations, and they are working with them exactly that feeder model that I'm talking about. And the taxi industry is seeing the benefits of that. And there are currently consultations with different taxi associations to bring them into expansion. So the taxi industry also appreciates for as long as they use outdated, backward, stone age methods of working, like just carrying money and cash, and they are not modernizing, accepting technology, taxi violence will never end. Because remember, the killing industry or the machinery that kills in the taxi industry works with basic demand and supply, money to pay, and that money is hard cash, unaccounted for money laundering. So if that is taken out and people pay using a card system, the taxi owner who is complaining that their money is being stolen will be able to get all the money. So there are benefits for them, because currently with the cash, their money get taken by gun, by ngabis. So the taxi industry is the biggest loser of a public transport system that is using outdated, backward, Stone Age methods. So with smart technology, with smart automation, with introducing cards to swipe, the taxi industry will be the biggest beneficiary, because it will also eliminate the taxi violence. So they are well aware of that.
Absolutely. I want to band the next 2 points together, and this is around social and economic benefits, MEC. From the example that you have given us, Gautrain clearly is a trailblazer, and there is an example of a smart mobility solution that seems to be working. The numbers are showing it. Let's talk about some of the social benefits that we have seen so far, and talk a little bit more about the economic benefits as well, because sometimes you hear often this accusation that the Gautrain is subsidized and therefore is not truly an example of a sustainable public transport solution that we can depend on into the future.
So let us dispel that that point, in the sense that it is a view that paint a picture of Gautrain as an elite system, overfunded. We may not. It doesn't play a key role in the economy. I think that point is based. It's correct to the extent that you look at it narrowly as just a train. But if you start to look at it broadly and in the most strategic way, let's look at, on any day and between peak hour, in the morning, midday, afternoon, we put a total of 50,000 cars. Let me even reduce it, 20,000 cars back on the road during peak hour, every day. Just tell me, how will we move in the province? Because Gautrain takes, in total during peak hour, almost, it carries about 66,000 passengers during peak hour. And in that, we know that about 50,000 of them park their cars. So if those cars were to return to the road, what will happen to congestion? What will happen to casualties on the road? Who will arrive at work what time? What time will learners go to school? How will movement be possible? Because we are not the Northern Cape. We are not KZN. We are not Limpopo with massive spatial space, land. We don't have that. We are a small, tiny province. 10,000, I can even reduce it to 10,000 cars. If they were to come back to the road, there won't be movement in this province. So if you look at Gautrain in that sense, you'll be able to see you are saving lives of people. You are saving the economy, because if you stay long on the road, you arrive at work, you're already tired. You stay long the road, you arrive at home late, tired. You spend most of your productive time on the road.
Sure.
These issues are not being looked at. Let me also say to you, if we were to plug out Gautrain from the CBD of Joburg, Rosebank, Sandton, Midrand up to Hatfield, we remove the red line. Without gold in this province and without gold mining activity, that real estate development that crowds in economic activity, employment, jobs, and bringing in other commercial activities, that will mean this province will be a ghost town, left with the digging of the ground by the history of the what is known as the gold rush period, when gold was the best. So we'll be sitting with a ghost town with ugly scars on the ground of the history of gold. That factor is not being looked at. every rail line crowds in investment, create jobs, sustain lives. Those issues are not being looked at. So when you just look at Gautrain narrowly, and the other thing that people must know is that when the contract with a concessionaire company is ending, we will remain with an asset. And we are also expanding Gautrain into townships. It is going to increase investments in the township because investments follows the rail line, and there's good example of that. So we've got to, and also this thing of pricing.
Yeah.
When you start any infrastructure investment in the early stages, because you have to pay for the cost of the infrastructure, it tends to scale up the cost. So with time, when we've paid for the investments in infrastructure, the cost over time will gradually go down.
Yeah.
So,
MEC.
so that theory, it's a completely false theory that I wish people could look at Gautrain not narrowly as a train coach. Just like I say, don't look at the taxi as a kumbi narrowly on the road. Look at it as an industry and what its potential is.
Yeah.
So this narrow approach to look at public transport modes, I think it's not correct in my view.
For your strategy to succeed, you will need the buy-in of obviously the traveling public. Now we know the traveling public would be motivated by cost, but I am suggesting, MEC, there's another aspect here that you ought to address, the issue of convincing the public to leave that car at home.
We will be going into conversations to say you are productive and much more smarter at work when you travel the shortest distance. Also, we have done the calculations of when you use your car compared to using Gautrain, where do you spend most of your money? With COVID-19, people don't have money. And remember, with a car, you also have to service it. You must pour petrol, you must maintain the vehicle, and there are costs to that.
Sure.
And that money, you can save it with Gautrain. And I can tell you, with smart mobility and the way we're looking at it, and with Gautrain as well, every day you take your car to the road, you are damaging the climate, the environment, and you are posing a risk to the future generations. You are better with smart mobility and using alternative modes of transport.
I think that neatly wraps it up. MEC, thanks very much indeed for joining us and chatting about the theme for this year's October month, which is the month for transport. That's the Gauteng MEC for Transport, Jacob Mamabolo. And that's the program for today. Thank you for watching. Until next time, bye for now.